Exposed. My granddaughter's shocking revelation unveils a hidden truth about my family's future. Frank stood at the edge of his cornfield, the sun dipping low and casting long shadows across the soil he had nurtured for decades. His hands, calloused and worn from toil, gripped the fence post as he watched the wind dance through the husks, an aching loneliness settling deep in his bones. The land whispered stories of generations, yet they now felt like echoes of what had once been vibrant, full of laughter, warmth, and the presence of his beloved Marjorie. She had always woven tales of their family history, but since her passing, the silence grew louder, pressing heavily against him. Resolute yet heavy-hearted, Frank believed that hard work and honesty were the lifeless pillars he had built his world upon. But that truth seemed fragile, unraveling with each passing season, as the solitude clung tighter like an unwelcome fog. Everything changed the day Mia arrived. A whirlwind of youthful rebellion wrapped in denim and vibrant hair, pushing through the door where he had once shared Sunday dinners with Marjorie. She stormed in with an energy that both fascinated and unsettled him. A part of him wanted to embrace her wild spirit, but another felt compelled to shield his old-world values from her enthusiasm. Their first conversation went in circles. Her questioning, clashing with his desire for family tradition, felt like a cold knife carving deeper wounds. The pain of years apart battled against the flickers of familial pride. He was desperate to reignite. With their lives inching closer to confrontation, Mia finally unveiled the revelation that rattled the very core of his being. A piece of land, theirs by right, stolen through deceitful manipulation long ago. The truth loomed like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. Frank's heart raced uncontrollably. Resentment boiled within him, fusing anger and confusion as he grappled with betrayal from sources he had placed trust in long ago. How could loyalty taste this bitter? The weight of this discovery disrupted everything he thought he knew about family, about himself. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. He felt the ground shifting beneath him. Not just the land he farmed, but his very sense of identity. What did this mean for him, for Mia? As they sat in the dim light of his kitchen, the atmosphere thick with unresolved tension, he struggled to reconcile his long-held belief in the righteousness of traditional values with the rebellious spark igniting in the young woman before him. Perhaps this journey would demand sacrifices, painful confrontations with figures from his past. As the thought of fighting for what was right crystallized in his mind, he also felt doubt swirling like leaves in a storm. Was reclaiming this land worth unraveling the estranged bond he had begrudgingly begun to rebuild? Mia's youthful bravado challenged his experience at every turn. Her ambition seemed detached from the patient cultivation he had endured for years, stirring unease in him. His heart sank deeper into the burden of a choice that felt all-consuming. Could he embrace the unknown? Step away from the parched ground he had tended for so long? Just when he thought there might be a path toward understanding between them. The weight of past betrayals, the whispers of loyalty once trusted, tightened around him like a noose. With dawn's light still shadowed by uncertainty, he realized that the real battle had only just begun, and neither of them might emerge unscathed. Frank awoke the next morning not to the familiar sounds of dawn roosters crowing or the rustling leaves, but to a suffocating silence. The air felt thick with unspoken words, and he lingered a moment longer on the edge of his bed. Each breath felt like a weight, pressing down on him as he grappled with the significance of Mia's discovery. The grainy memories of his past danced in his mind, spiraling into a kaleidoscope of doubt and resentment. He had always prided himself on being a man of principle, of unwavering resolve in the face of adversity. But his battle was no longer just against the elements. It was an internal struggle that clawed at his spirit. He found himself wandering toward the kitchen, the emptiness of the house amplifying the thrum of tension within him. The coffee brewing sent a familiar scent wafting through the air, a small comfort amidst the chaos. As he poured the coffee, Frank's mind raced with questions that threatened to derail his focus. What did Mia expect of him? Should he embrace her urgency, toss aside decades of routine and tradition? His gaze shifted toward the cornfield, the green stalks standing tall and defiant. Here, the soil overflowed with memories, each kernel planted a testament to his labor and love. Yet, at that moment, there was an undeniable yearning within him to transform that love into action, to reclaim not only the land lost, but also the connection he had nearly severed with his granddaughter. Here was the intersection of past and present, and it demanded his courage. As he stepped outside, the horizon transformed into a sprawling canvas painted with promise. The sun's first rays kissed the leaves, and a whisper of resolve filled his lungs. Perhaps this was not solely a fight for land, but a fight for reconnection, for legacy, and for healing. He had buried so much under the weight of his grief that the emergence of this tumultuous truth might just be the catalyst he needed. Determined, Frank approached the dilapidated barn where decades of history stood withering in the shadows. Inside, it was a sanctuary of memories. Faded tools and old photographs lined the walls, relics from days spent working alongside Marjorie. Each item told stories of labor and love, of family and loyalty. Yet as he scanned the space, a new revelation flickered to life. He started sifting through the storage boxes, clearing away dust that had settled, both physically and metaphorically, over his heart. Among the remnants of his past, he found an old ledger, its pages worn, yet still legible. This contained records of transactions and agreements made long before Mia's revelation. Frank flipped through the yellowed pages, and with each entry, a sense of clarity began to dawn. He could harness this historical evidence to confront those who had wronged him. The energy building within him morphed from uncertainty to determination. He had something tangible to hold on to now, a narrative to weave into the battleground that awaited. His resolve deepened when he realized the power the documents held. If he could reclaim not just the land but also his relationship with Mia, it would transform everything our family was meant to represent. With the ledger in hand and a stirring sense of purpose igniting his spirit, Frank noticed Mia approaching him from the distance, her presence unmistakable yet freed from rebellion. Her softer demeanor carried the lingering remnants of yesterday's tumult, but this time, she held her head high. As they faced each other, he sensed an opportunity lurking between them, a shared understanding waiting to be activated. The stakes had never been higher, and the implications of their journey would shape the course of their futures. "Frank," she began tentatively, "we need to talk." Those words hung in the air, loaded with both vulnerability and weight. Frank nodded, heart racing as he understood the significance of the moment. This wasn't merely about confronting the past, it was about stepping into a new chapter of their relationship. The pivotal question loomed in his mind: could they indeed forge a path toward reconciliation and justice, or would old wounds obstruct every step of their journey? As they prepared to share their truths, Frank felt the ground beneath him a mixture of hope and dread, as the moment of truth was about to arrive. And then, just as the sun began to rise fully, illuminating their path, he reflected on the urgency within them. The time has come to face the implications of their shared legacy. Would it be enough to conquer the betrayal that had once threatened to rip their family apart? Frank stood before Mia, feeling the weight of their shared past pressing in around them. The ledger, a bridge to potential reclamation, rested in his hands like a beating heart. Mia's gaze held a mixture of uncertainty and determination, echoing his own internal turmoil. "About the land," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "I think I may have found something that you should hear." There was a newfound sincerity as she stepped closer, mirroring his pulse of resolve. "Go on," he prompted, trying to mask the tightness in his chest. She offered him a hesitant smile, and in that moment, he realized how much he craved her approval, her acceptance of who he was and what he intended to become. "There are families in the area willing to support us," she explained, her tone shifting from reserve to earnest. "Some are even willing to challenge the decisions made by the council. They see the value not just in the land, but in what it represents for our family." Frank felt a stirring in his heart, a flicker of hope. This was the kind of assertion he had needed to hear. It was both a reminder of the community that once encircled them, and an invitation to embrace the fight he had almost conceded. "But we can't do this alone," she pressed, her eyes now ablaze with conviction. "I know I pushed you away once, and I'm sorry for that. But I need my grandfather to stand with me. We need to rally supporters to our side. A rush of emotions cascaded through Frank, an urge to protect, to reclaim, and to stand tall against the forces that had torn at their family roots. He could feel the memories of Marjorie beside him, as if she were whispering encouragement from those faded photographs. Did he have the strength to not only confront enemies, but also embrace a new alliance with Mia? Yes, we will stand together, he asserted, pride flooding his voice. He could not allow past betrayals to dictate their future anymore. They had an opportunity handed to them, a chance to redefine what it meant to be family, so he would not squander it. They began to strategize, outlining a plan that felt as hefty as the old barn's weathered door. Frank listed potential allies from memory, their neighbors, friends from the market, people who had shared in their harvest celebrations, and even those who knew the history of the land. Each name sparked excitement within him, a flame that ignited his resolve that as they drafted their approach, Frank felt his old fears begin to dissolve. He was rediscovering his voice, the one that had grown faint under the weight of solitude. Mia's enthusiasm juxtaposed with his deep-rooted wisdom to evoke something profound. Their individual strengths were becoming one, but amidst their planning, shadows danced just outside the realm of their hopeful dialogue. Dark figures from Frank's past loomed on the periphery, dismissive authority figures who had long viewed him as a relic of a bygone era. Resentment re-emerged as he remembered the betrayal, the broken promises that had laid waste to his trust. Frank, Mia's voice broke through his reverie, grounding him. We need to focus. What if the council pushes back? We will be prepared, he declared, though the uncertainty lingered like a distant storm on the horizon. They had to capitalize on momentum, but what would happen when the inevitable confrontation arose? Just then, a thought slashed through him, a revelation he hadn't fully acknowledged before. He might not just be fighting for land. He was reclaiming his identity as a grandfather, forging a legacy rooted in strength and resilience. Let us start reaching out, he said, gripping the ledger tighter, determination fueling his spirit. Let us show them we're not backing down. Mia nodded, and in that moment of shared commitment, Frank understood that they created something anew, a partnership built not on fear, but on the promise of what was yet to come. Yet beneath that resolve lay an undercurrent of doubt as a fresh wave of determination washed over him. Frank couldn't help but question whether the ghosts of the past would remain forever present. The council was not unaware of the brewing discontent, and they would not hesitate to strike back. Are we truly ready for this? He thought, the question echoing ominously in his mind that as the sun started its journey toward the zenith, illuminating the barn around them, Frank knew that they stood at a precipice. The time was ripe for confrontation, but they would first need to uncover the definition of what they were truly fighting for. And just then, as he turned to share this insight with Mia, a chilling sensation crept through him, the realization that taking this next step might awaken old demons that were better left undisturbed. Frank leaned against the rickety workbench, the leader's ledger open before him, its yellowed pages heavy with history. Each mark and note whispered of struggles long past, of inevitabilities that now stirred within him like ghosts awakened by his resolve. Let us do this, he said, his tone steady as he met Mia's determined gaze. In that moment her presence grounded him. She was an anchor pulling him away from the turbulence that had threatened to unmoor him for too long. But doubt still clouded his clarity, creeping into the corners of his mind. Old resentments and failures whispered reminders of how easily hope could falter. We need to approach the neighbors first. If we can get them on board, Frank trailed off, fighting against the persistent weight of his own skepticism. Would they support him after the years of silence, the fractures left by abandonment? Right. But we also need to anticipate the council's reactions, Mia interjected, bravely casting aside his hesitations. They won't just back down. They'll retaliate, and we have to be prepared. He nodded slowly. There it was again, acknowledgement. If he wanted to reclaim their shared history, he had to confront the looming figures of authority with the same courage he aspired to instill in Mia. We should document the community's sentiments, he proposed, flipping to a fresh page in the ledger. If we can gather testimonies, evidence of what this land means to the people, maybe we can strengthen our position. Mia lit up at the suggestion, a spark igniting in her eyes. Yes. We can organize meetings, small gatherings, informal conversations at the farmer's market. Word of mouth can spread like wildfire. Frank felt it, the thrill of action. He was no longer just reactively engaging with the past. He was shaping a future. There, among the dust motes dancing in the sunlight filtering through the barn, he began to visualize their efforts spreading beyond the boundaries of their old fears. But as the hour lengthened, so did the shadows. The sun's descent reminded him that each passing moment brought them closer to confrontation with the council. And among the voices of the community were the whispers of treachery he had long shielded himself from. "Have you thought about who could turn? Who has connections to the council?" Frank asked, the caution bleeding into his voice that Mia's brow furrowed as she considered their options. "There's always someone. But I believe if we present a united front, they'll think twice. Or they might strike harder," he replied, his pulse quickening. "We need a plan B. If they come at us with a lawsuit or threats, then we fight back. Together," she asserted, her conviction steadying him. "This is bigger than us. It's about breaking the cycle." A flicker of a smile crossed his lips, and for the first time in years, he felt his spirit lift a little. Could they really do this? As night began to cloak the barn in shadows, Frank couldn't shake the sense of vulnerability, now intermingled with determination. The ledger, once a mere memento, now carried the weight of their ambitions. "Remember what I told you about connections?" Mia asked, her voice gentle yet fierce. "You were respected before things changed. We need you to amplify that respect again." He sighed. The memories flooded back, people he had once inspired, mentors he had looked up to. But would they remember him? Would the past betrayals overshadow what he now aspired to be? "I'm not the man I used to be," he whispered almost to himself. "What if they don't believe I can lead this?" "You are that man, Frank," she insisted. "And if you falter, I will be here. You will not face your past alone." A wave of warmth settled in his chest. He was not merely reclaiming land. He was reconstructing his very identity. This was a complex tapestry woven with threads of forgiveness, ambition, and legacy. As they gathered their materials for the next day's tasks, anticipation and anxiety entwined within him. The new alliance with Mia, while invigorating, was also a staggering shift in everything he thought he had lost. But in that moment, something deep in Frank stirred. He would not allow the failures of his past to dictate the triumphs of his present. The fight for their future was not merely about land. It was a tangible pathway back to who he was meant to be. Just then, a shudder reverberated through him. He was not just facing a council. He could feel old demons flexing in the backdrop, their whispers growing louder. The road ahead twisted with unknowns, but as he steadied his breath, he recognized one truth. Sometimes you must confront the darkness to illuminate your path forward. "Tomorrow we begin," he said with renewed certainty. And as Mia nodded in agreement, he sensed the first stirrings of something profound. A reckoning was looming, not just with the council but within himself. Would he emerge unscathed, or would past mistakes ensnare him once more? The answer awaited him at dawn. Dawn broke with a heavy light, casting shadows that shifted like unsettled thoughts. Frank stepped out of the barn, determination steeled in every fiber of his being. Today was not merely a test of his courage. It was a confrontation with his very self. As he surveyed the empty land, the daybreak highlighting the contours of fields long tilled, but not forgotten, he felt a surge of both dread and empowerment. Each blade of grass seemed to be an echo of hope intertwined with ghosts of disappointment. A terrain that mirrored his internal battleground. His heart pounded as he replayed Mia's words in his mind. Were they true? In his solitary moments, self-doubt clung to him. Yet here and now, as the sun rose boldly, he understood that the fight wouldn't be against the council alone, but against his self-imposed limitations. As he approached the group of neighbors for their first meeting, he recalled the faces of those who once looked to him for guidance. Time had frayed those connections, but he had a chance to mend them. Mia stood nearby, her presence a reassuring force. She glanced at him, and he recognized the flicker of unspoken faith in her eyes, a reminder that sometimes resolve mirrored itself in another's belief. People began to arrive, skeptical yet curious. Frank felt every stare like a needle, pricking at insecurities he had long buried. The remnants of past mistakes crawled up his spine, whispering useless admonitions. He hesitated, the ledger pressed against his chest like a shield. Perhaps, he thought, vulnerability would be his most potent weapon. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves dancing beneath the surface. "I know we haven't spoken in some time, and that's on me." He took a breath, deliberately lowering his tone to capture their attention. "But today, I stand before you, not just as a former leader, but as someone who needs your help." Frank's eyes swept across the familiar faces, searching for the embers of past connections. Each nod, each furrowed brow, was a reminder that rebuilding trust wouldn't come easy. He felt his throat tighten as he detailed the council's plans, a specter of authority that threatened not only their land, but the essence of their shared community. After he spoke, silence settled, heavy and charged. The air crackled with anticipation and uncertainty. Then, like a tidal wave, voices erupted, some in disbelief, others in defensive postures. Frank's heart sank momentarily as doubt crept back. Was this futile? Did they see him as he once was, or merely a reminder of what had failed? But Mia stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "We're not here to revisit the past. Frank has asked us to think about our future, about what this land means to us." The spark in her words caught fire in others, igniting conversations that flowed, frustrations, shared hopes, murmurs of solidarity. As he observed, Frank recognized a profound realization dawning within him. This wasn't merely about him reclaiming a role. It was about collectively understanding their shared anger and hope. That as voices melded into a chorus of enthusiasm, he felt momentum shifting. The energy in the room swelled, but so did the weight of responsibility. Was he ready to carry that burden again? As the meeting drew to a close, they agreed to gather testimonies, to document their vision, to fight the impending decisions of the council, their resolve tumbling into action. Frank left the meeting with a newfound clarity. The purpose was painfully clear. He would have to revisit his former selves, the leader that once inspired, the man who faltered, and the individual who now stood once again at the precipice of hope. But just then, a chilling thought struck him. What would happen when the council confronted them? Would his allies remain steadfast when the walls began to close in? The answer lurked in the recesses of his mind, a nagging sensation that old betrayals could surface, dismantling the fragile alliances he was trying to forge. He felt the ground slip beneath his feet, anxiety gnawing at his resolve. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but today had unearthed a vital truth. He was not merely fighting for land or leadership, but for the very restoration of trust that had long been lost. And with that, the challenge faded into focus. He may need to confront not only the council but also the betrayals that lingered like shadows in his wake. Would he reclaim this journey, or would the remnants of his past undermine the arduous path ahead? The dread of this confrontation loomed like a dark cloud, demanding resolution. Frank lay awake long after the meeting, his thoughts swirling like a storm cloud. The weight of his responsibilities pressed heavily on his chest, and he struggled to navigate the labyrinth of his own mind. What did it mean to lead again? Would he choke under the pressure as he had done before? The familiar specters of guilt and regret danced in and out of his consciousness, threatening to cloud the progress he had made. He replayed every word that had been spoken throughout the afternoon, every nod of encouragement coming from Mia, or the few who dared support him. The energy had shifted, but he knew that real change required more than just renewed sentiments. It demanded action, and the kind of unwavering fortitude that he had yet to summon in his own heart. Suddenly, the haunting question emerged, gnawing at him. Could he truly forge alliances with people he felt he had lost? Each one of those faces had memories tied to moments of failure, and those ghosts taunted him, feeding his fear. Frank sat up, deciding that he needed to confront this head-on. If he were to stand in the face of the council, he must also confront the betrayals he had experienced, face those who had turned away when he needed them most. The next morning he rose with a sense of unease coiled within him. Instead of heading back to the barn, he drove into town, determined to seek out old acquaintances whom he hadn't seen in years. Would they join him in standing against the council? Or would they look at him as a specter of disappointment? He clenched the steering wheel, resolute in the need for clarity. An old-fashioned diner came into view and he parked, heart pounding. Inside, he found the faces he'd been trying to avoid. Tom, Jess, and Anna, all familiar yet distant. remnants of the tangled web of their shared past. "Frank," Tom said, surprise mixed with skepticism filling his voice. "What brings you back here?" "I need to talk," Frank replied, his voice steady despite the turbulence brewing within. The trio looked at him with fixated curiosity, but Frank could sense the boundaries they had placed around their expectations of him. He took a deep breath. "It's about the council." The ensuing conversation was as fraught as he had anticipated. Old wounds opened as they recounted memories laced with animosity and disappointment. Frank listened as accusations sliced through the air, and buried anger bubbled to the surface. Yet as he engaged, he found an unexpected resilience in their criticisms. Each point of contention beckoned him to confront his past transgressions, to acknowledge their pain. As the conversation deepened, Frank admitted his mistakes, fully aware of the complexities of their shared history. He found that acknowledgement almost liberating, and as he spoke he also felt himself evolving. It became clear to him that honesty would be his greatest asset. The more he laid bare his vulnerabilities, the more he witnessed their walls begin to crack. "Maybe it's time we stop letting the past hold us back," Anna finally said, a note of tentative hope weaving through her tone. "We won't know unless we try." Her words lit a spark in Frank. He had come to these familiar faces seeking approval, yet realized he was offering them something more significant. A chance at rediscovery of their shared community, of themselves. However, as they began to discuss potential solutions, doubt clawed at the edges of Frank's thoughts again. What if this newfound unity crumbled at the first sign of adversity from the council? Each idea they shared shimmered with possibility, but also with risk. Had they truly set aside their past grievances, or were they merely burying them again, waiting for the right moment to resurface? As the discussion ended, and they agreed to meet again, Frank felt the slivers of hope intertwining with his trepidation. He was ready to embrace a future built on honesty, but the specter of betrayal still hovered like a persistent shadow. He stepped into the cool air outside, a newfound resolve blossoming, even as anxiety twisted in his gut like a serpent. Tomorrow would bring yet another meeting where trust would be tested. Could he cultivate a bond strong enough to withstand the council's impending confrontation? Each step he took down the street echoed with the urgent reminder that the answer lived not just in others, but in his own ability to lead by example. What lay ahead transformed into a precarious tightrope walk, one that would confront not only external adversaries, but also the internal divides within himself. As he drove away, he knew the ultimate test was yet to come. Facing the council and the hidden truths that could either forge alliances, or bring everything crashing down. Would he succeed in binding his past to the present and emerge stronger? Or would he fall once again into those forgotten shadows of doubt? The day began with a raw overcast sky, mirroring the uncertainty gnawing at Frank. He barely slept the night prior, his mind racing with the ramifications of his confrontations. The diner's conversation circled in his thoughts like a relentless mantra, an invitation to redeem not just relationships, but his entire narrative. He understood change demanded courage, and today he needed to embody it. As he prepared to face the council, Frank spent a final moment at the barn, staring at the horses. Their unyielding presence appeared steadfast compared to his inner turmoil. He remembered his father's words about accountability and leadership. They echoed louder now, calling him to step into a role he had shunned for far too long. How could he lead if he continued to hide behind layers of fear? He made his way to the council's office, where tension hung thick in the air, a palpable entity that could crush him if he let it. Each footstep felt like a test, a deliberate act of defiance against the self-doubt that had plagued him for years. The council chamber loomed ahead, its doors heavy, embodying the weight of expectations. Each meeting with them had left him more fragmented than before, yet today he was resolved to confront them directly, his history no longer a bitter anchor but a necessary compass. When Frank finally entered, the council members were already seated, their expressions a patchwork of skepticism and muted indifference. He could almost feel the history weighing down on him. Accusations whispered through the years were coated in bitter resentment. He sensed their apprehension, their disbelief at seeing him again, and a part of him feared it would turn hostile. "Mr. Sullivan," the head of the council began, a hint of condescension lacing her words. "We were not expecting you." What is the purpose of this unannounced visit? With resolve threading through his voice, Frank began. I came to talk about the past, present, and future of this community. He forced his eyes to meet theirs, facing the trio like a gladiator entering the arena. I want to address the way we handled things and how it has impacted not just my standing but our potential forward. Murmurs echoed as Frank continued, bearing his vulnerabilities. He spoke of his failures, allowing himself to be exposed, vulnerable in front of old adversaries. The impassioned plea resonated in the chamber, weaving together personal fallout with collective responsibility. Every word felt like unearthing buried treasure. His ability to articulate his thoughts elucidated truths he had long forgotten about himself. When he concluded, there was an unexpected silence, the type that signaled a shifting tide. The council members exchanged cautious glances, their facades cracking for a fleeting moment. One young councilman, who had sat silently, finally leaned forward. Are you suggesting we reconsider our approach? Perhaps work together, even after what happened? Yes, Frank responded, the rush of adrenaline urging him onward. But it requires honesty from all of us. I am prepared to rebuild bridges if we can agree to meet each other halfway. As discussions unfolded, the air within the chamber shifted from hostility to something more tentative. An unexpected arsenal of ideas took flight as voices gradually rose, a chorus of perspectives intermingling with cautious optimism. They were beginning to understand Frank was not the enemy but perhaps the catalyst for change they needed in a collapsed system. Yet, as each council member deliberated, a weight still lingered in the room, the ever-present fear that this newfound alliance could dissolve at the first sign of tribulation. But what if Frank could succeed? What if stepping beyond their collective regrets could lead to an uncharted possibility? Just then, as he prepared for a deeper conversation about terms of collaboration, a figure loomed unexpectedly at the door, interrupting the fragile momentum. An unfamiliar face, yet hauntingly familiar with the sharpness of recognition coursing through Frank's veins, brought everything he believed he had reconciled crashing down. Frank, we need to talk, the newcomer said, voice steady but distressed. There's something you don't know. Something that could change everything. As uncertainty gripped Frank once more, he realized that the battle for his past was far from over, and the real test of his leadership had only just begun. The moment of truth arrived. What hidden revelations awaited him? Frank's heart raced at the sight of the newcomer, a tall silhouette that stirred memories better left buried. His chest tightened, a chill clawing its way up his spine as he recognized the determined young woman standing before him. Eliza, his estranged granddaughter. The weight of her presence was overwhelming, tinged with implications that terrified him. Eliza shifted her weight, the tension in the air thickening as council members turned their attention from Frank to her. Her eyes flickered with an urgency that invigorated his long-buried instincts to protect. You need to know about your inheritance, what has been kept from you, she stated, her tone cutting through the swarm of misgivings clouding his mind. Is this really the time? He snapped, tempering his rising frustration with the knowledge that she had bridged a chasm he long thought uncrossable. The council was watching. They were judging. There's never a wrong time to uncover the truth, she replied, her determination flaring like a candle in a storm. Aren't you tired of living in the shadows of your past? There's so much more at stake than just you. Your decisions resonate beyond this room. Her words struck him with the force of unacknowledged guilt. Frank felt exposed again, stripped to the essence of his failures. Memories of lost chances swirling chaotically in his mind. The council murmured amongst themselves, their skepticism now palpable. This had shifted from community dialogue to personal reckoning. Please go on, Frank urged, curiosity mingling with dread. The open-heartedness he'd summoned earlier felt fragile now, resting on the razor's edge of vulnerability. Eliza hesitated, gauging the council's ambient judgment before flipping the script. You're not just a leader, Frank. You're a legacy. There are things I've discovered that connect to your family, choices made in silence that affect us all. A quick glance at the council revealed a palpable shift, their expressions hardened, eyes narrowing with suspicion and intrigue. Frank noticed one council member reaching for a pen, perhaps hoping to take notes on this unexpected development, or maybe preparing for a counterattack. The revelation of a hidden family narrative sparked a glimmer of ambition within him. What could he learn? Who had hidden truths from him, and why? Yet as the thrill of potential understanding ignited in his chest, so did the creeping dread of exposure. Maybe it's time we clarify our past, Frank said, his voice even but tinged with rising anxiety. But I need to know what you found, Eliza. Don't hold anything back. She grabbed a document from her bag, a tangible piece of their family history that felt like a ticking time bomb. This was just a coincidence, but I think it's connected to everything your father, your decisions, the council's choices. You need to see this to understand why change isn't just possible but necessary. As she unfolded the paper, the fragile atmosphere shifted again, becoming tense and electric. Frank felt the gaze of the council turn back to him. An unsettling mix of deliberation and disbelief splattered across their faces. Do we really want to dive back into the past? The council chair posed skeptically, sensing a potential derailment of the tentative agreement they had begun to forge. The question, Frank asserted, feeling the resolve seep back into his bones, is if we can afford not to. He turned back to Eliza, fully aware that the path ahead might reveal not just truths about his family, but about himself. Revealing wounds and buried pride had ignited a spark to confront what he had shunned. But as he leaned in to hear what lay on the document, he knew that this exposure could ignite a war of revelations. Whatever Eliza had unearthed could either tether him to his legacy, or sever ties irrevocably. Please tell me everything, he urged, bracing himself for the weight of change as Eliza prepared to share the reality of their intertwined futures. Frank realized that embracing this moment meant stepping into a deeper battle for his identity, a gamble that could either restore or destroy everything he thought he knew. With his heart hammering in his chest, he found himself on the brink of something significant. A reckoning that could ultimately reshape not only his relationships within the council, but also the very fabric of his family's history. And just as Eliza began to read, a sudden crack of thunder echoed outside, underscoring the tempest brewing not just in the skies but within him. Would this storm shatter his resolve or cleanse the path to transformation? Eliza's voice sliced through the dense silence, her words deliberate and heavy. This document traces our lineage back 3 generations. It details why your relationship with the council has soured, and how your father's choices have rippled through time. It implicates not just him but decisions you made that have fractured this community. Each revelation was like a hammer to the anvil of Frank's mind, shaping him anew, but also threatening to shatter his preconceived notions of who he was and where he stood. The council's eyes widened, reflecting his deepest fears. Could he have unknowingly contributed to this quiet chaos? Every year, they present shifts in policy and community directives, but they only reflect what this council believes is the right way to safeguard their narratives. Your father possessed the power to change that narrative, and you have the same opportunity if you embrace it. The fire in Eliza's eyes bore into him, demanding he confront the truths long buried beneath layers of denial. He felt a torrent of emotions: anger, regret, a sliver of excitement. Her revelation was not just a warning. It was a hand reaching out, urging him to grasp it, to reclaim the influence he had nearly shrunk from. Yet the walls he had built around himself stood tall, fortified by years of regret and fear. What you're saying can't just be taken lightly, Eliza, he said, straining to steady his voice as it trembled. You're suggesting that I have power where there was only neglect. Exactly. She stepped closer, lowering her voice, as if confiding a fragile secret. You can't shy away from the burden of legacy any longer. It's in your hands now. The fires of change are sparked by acknowledgement. Your silence has chained this community to the past. Imagine what could happen if you chose to confront it. Eliza's passion reignited a flicker of courage within him, but doubt clawed back viciously. What if his voice did nothing? What if unveiling the truth plunged his family deeper into strife and division? As the council members exchanged whispering glances, a churning tension raced between them. Frank felt the scrutiny, the weight of their preconceived judgments cloaking him like a thick fog. They were waiting for him to react, to guide them through this unfolding chaos he had inadvertently begun. Change doesn't come easily, does it? He muttered, a tremor in his thoughts. But as he looked at Eliza, standing there like a beacon of hope in a gathering storm, a dawning realization brewed within him. Perhaps this was the crucible he needed, a test of not just his leadership, but of his own legacy. I never imagined we'd have to face the repercussions of the past, let alone together, he began, the urgency in his voice rising alongside his determination. But if I am to take ownership of this inheritance, then I must know everything. What exactly does this document reveal? Holding the document as if it were a talisman, Eliza breathed deeply. It includes accounts of political maneuvers, alliances forged and broken by your father, ones that affect decisions made today. If you're willing to confront that history, it might finally set this community free from the cycles of mistrust. The weight of her words struck him once more, leaving Frank teetering on the edge of conviction and fear. Unraveling the truth could either solidify his leadership or dismantle it completely. But what if this was the impetus he needed to redefine his role, not just as a council member, but as a patriarch who could guide his family toward healing? The storm outside intensified, resonating with the turmoil within him. What if embracing this legacy meant diving into a tempest he had tried so hard to escape? Tell me everything, Eliza, he demanded again, now fully aware that each word she spoke could unravel or reconstruct the very foundations of his life, and the lives entwined with his. As she began to read, the air thickened with anticipation, promising revelations that could alter not just his relationship with the council, but the course of his family's future. Frank braced himself, ready to face the storm, knowing that the tide of his legacy had only just begun to turn. Would this be the moment he either sank or swam? Frank sat at his kitchen table, the morning sunlight streaming in, illuminating the remnants of his coffee cup, the only thing that had insisted on staying constant through the tumultuous storm of recent events. The ledger, now scattered with notes and diagrams he and Mia had crafted, lay open before him, its pages now witnesses to his journey of reclamation. Today marked a turning point. His battle for personal and legacy redemption would finally reach a defining resolution. With every idea shared and every story unearthed over the past weeks, Frank had stepped into a role he long believed was lost to him, a leader, a protector, and now, a grandfather empowered by evolution rather than shackled by the past. The community rallied around him and Mia. Conversations turned hopeful as they reconnected with neighbors who had once drifted away, rekindling alliances forged through shared history. As he glanced at the old photographs of Marjorie that adorned the kitchen walls, he recognized that stepping beyond pain and betrayal had required not just courage, but also a willingness to embrace vulnerability. He had initially feared the thought of facing the council, but now they embodied not just adversaries, but a potential partnership toward a restored vision of community. Frank's phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. A message from Mia flashed across the screen. We've decided to hold the meeting at the community hall today. Everyone agrees it's time for the truth to come out. That simple message felt like a spark igniting a dry landscape, one that had long awaited the promise of rain. Today was the day that everything would change. He took a calming breath, the event looming on his calendar marked with a sense of urgency and preparation. The allies they gathered, the testimonies they decompiled, these were the tangible elements that had fueled the fire within him, reminding him that transcendence required resonance beyond personal struggle. The council meeting would be intense. Frank envisioned that room filled with people holding untold judgments, along with lingering mistrust. Yet for the first time, he felt a sense of shared purpose. They were not just voices against authority. They were many factions united under a banner of truth and legacy. Incorporating Eliza's discovery into their narrative could reshape decades of misunderstandings. As he arrived at the community hall, its doors heavy, yet inviting, Frank was met with familiar faces. Smiles mingled with uncertainty. The warmth of shared resolve swelled like a tide, and he knew today would serve not just as a confrontation with the council, but as a celebration of reclamation for him and his family's legacy. He stepped inside, the hall imbued with a sense of expectancy. The air felt electric, charged with possibilities. Mia was there, flanked by neighbors who had once stood by him, their expressions hopeful yet shrouded with remnants of past grievances. Frank took a moment to appreciate the supportive alliance he had unwillingly, yet undeniably transcended into existence. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady as he recognized the wall of anticipation resting heavily above them. "Today, we are gathered not just as neighbors, but as a community eager to reclaim our narrative, our land, and our connections. I recognize that trust doesn't get rebuilt overnight. And it has been far too long since we stood together. I stand here not only as your former leader, or a grandfather willing to fight for right today. I stand for change. His heart raced as he looked each face in the crowd, feeling both their skepticism and their hope. As he began to describe the transformations he had endured since Mia had come into his life, he felt the stratifications between past and present begin to dissolve. I have carried burdens of betrayal and silence. But together, we can challenge everything that has kept us apart. It's time we confront the council with transparent truths. He gestured towards Mia and Eliza, feeling their supportive presence bolster him as he discussed the need for action and transparency in addressing the lost land and the rightful asset it represented to their histories. With each word he built a bridge not just to reclaim land, but to span the wide chasm of disconnection long bred by neglect. As voices erupted with agreement and fervor filled the room, Frank felt an ineffable connection emerge. Their shared mission breathed life into his ambition. Then the moment came when he encouraged Eliza to share what she had learned about their family's past. Eliza stepped forward, her voice clear and confident as she handed out copies of the document. This is our truth, and with it, we recalibrate everything we thought we knew. It's time to let honesty embed itself into our new interactions. As the audience absorbed the information, gasps and murmurs swirled through the hall. Frank's heart surged. He watched neighbors begin to unite behind a new banner of accountability and commitment to evolving from the shadows of the past rather than being swallowed by them. He could see the pendulum swing toward trust. Finally, as Frank addressed the council with newfound clarity, armed with communal support and unity, he delivered an impassioned plea for collaboration and justice. Let us ensure this community learns from its missteps and rises to restore itself through honesty rather than concealment. Together, we can reshape our narrative and influence children and grandchildren far beyond our own experience. The council members exchanged hesitant looks, reluctance evident. Yet the growing sense of resolve and shared responsibility from the community resonated with them. It became apparent that bravery begets bravery. That shift, that essential pivot from blaming the past to enhancing the future, proved to be the breakthrough moment Frank had been reaching for. As he wrapped up, Frank recognized a new sense of self-awareness. He was no longer merely an elderly farmer holding on to past grievances. He had transformed into a man of bridging legacies. The triumph wasn't solely about winning a battle against the council. It was about doing right by the family he was weaving together with Mia and Eliza. With a firm handshake, he closed the hall meeting, and in that moment, he felt the firm foundation of recognition for his growth that in overcoming vulnerability and connecting with the tapestry of lives surrounding him, he had finally embraced the legacy he was meant to claim. He had transformed into a pivotal force of change within the community. As the meeting concluded, Frank stepped outside with Mia and Eliza at his side. The weight of uncertainty lifted. They walked into the brisk evening air, where the sun dipped low on the horizon, symbolizing hope and renewal. I always believed you were more than just the past, Mia whispered with a grin. Eliza nodded, the tenderness in their bond a stark reminder of dreams now within reach. Frank grinned, realizing they had ultimately learned that in confronting shadows, they crafted their own light. Spoils of reclaiming identity and legacy burgeoned, proving that real power lay not only in the land but within the hearts gathered together to defend it. This was just the beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.